Excellent. No worries. I shall run through briefly the sort of topics I'm going to be covering tonight. The sort of teaching background in me, I like to sort of write down the topics, and hopefully you can keep me honest by saying I've covered them all, or you've got questions about these coming up. So write them down. The key question, or the key issue with the questions, is with the webinar, it's a lot easier to do them as a Q&A at the end. I like with an audience, if I can actually answer them throughout, if I've got a live audience, but it's a little hard on a webinar. So yeah, jot them down in the Q&A, and we'll address them towards the end, quite possibly through the Q&A session at the very end of tonight. So I'm going to cover tonight just sort of a little bit of a hypothetical thinking about to 2035. Then I'll talk about the savings that EVs offer, and then I'll talk about charging and how it differs from refueling, and how it is actually a much easier thing to do these days, and understanding range of EVs and what sort of estimates you can rely on and what ones you can't. I'll talk about new car buying and the things to look for, things that are possibly coming up with all new cars these days, but are worth a consideration. I also talk about buying second-hand EVs and some useful information there. I do like to run through a bit of myth busting as a lighter end at the end of my presentations, and I'll give you a list of resources, which will also be popped up in the Q&A, and I'll also pop my email address up at the end. It's Bryce at I'll correct myself, evnews@bigpond.com. I'll be putting it up as well at the end. If people want to email me for the slides, if you have a Gmail address, if you email me at my business address, which is at EV Choice, I can't reply to you for some reason. Gmail doesn't like my business email address account. So yeah, use the Big Pond one for EV News at Big Pond. Anyway, starting off, little hypothetical. I'm going to talk about 2035. That's only, what, 8.5 years away. Battery electric vehicle sales are past probably 80%. I'm told I'm rather pessimistic. Some people predict 2030 being that number. I'm going to say 2035 perhaps. All new cars being sold to 80%, and maybe half the car park, all the cars on the road in Australia, have hit 50%. Fuel sales are dropping off a cliff because as cars get older, they generally do fewer distance than newer ones. So it'll be less than 50% of the current fuel sales. By the way, peak internal combustion engine car in terms of numbers worldwide was in 2017. They haven't exceeded that, and probably actually will never do so now. So it was 2017 was the high point of all internal combustion engine cars. So as you can see, BEVs have already been filling up because there's certainly more cars are sold now than 2017, but that difference is made up by the battery electric cars and the plug-in hybrids. It just is by the by. So fuel sales have dropped off a cliff. Your internal combustion engine resale values have also plummeted because people want EVs. You've probably already noticed that the EV prices secondhand have skyrocketed since Donald Trump's pro-green energy push lately. The BEVs are still only 50% of secondhand market, so they're sought after, and your internal combustion engine cars won't be. So have a think about this. Where will you refuel your petrol car or diesel car in 2035 if the petrol stations are disappearing? In 2035, even though it's still 20% of sales are internal combustion engines, why would you buy one then? Obviously, your resale value is plummeting. They're hard to refuel. A bit like LPG cars now, it's very hard to find a refueling station. So if you wouldn't buy a new internal combustion engine car then, why would you buy one today, only 8.5 years before that time? So having left you with that little thought, I'm going to start on the presentation in hand. So first up, I'm always talking about cars. That's where I come from. But the EV transition is coming in all forms. Everything needs to be getting off the fossil fuels as they run out and as they pollute our environment. So trucks, yes, they are coming. And in fact, the fact sheets that I write, I've just started one on trucks over 4.5 tonne up to 50 tonne, articulated and rigid. They're the Tesla trucks that you see there, and Scania. Some of those will actually do 500 kilometres or more in range. So people think that a hydrogen car is going to at least make it in trucks. I'm afraid to say it's already been knocked on the head by these really good range trucks. Machinery, electric machinery is well on the way. There's an electric bobcat was shown a couple of years ago, and you buy a small version of that now here in Australia. Mining machinery in general, especially underground stuff, is really good if it can be electric, and it is going electric. There are a number of companies building quite large pieces of machinery. Tractors we should start seeing here this year. That should be arriving sometime soon. And who hasn't tried to be run over by an electric delivery bicycle? In fact, almost every second bicycle you see these days is an electric powered one now, and scooters and various other things. That, by the way, is an electric motorcycle built by Harley Davidson called the Livewire, and they've been around several years now. I've seen a few of them around. That is actually also an electric plane, a flight trainer. There's a number of those in Melbourne, I believe, as flight trainers. They're very useful because they're quiet and run much more efficient and easy and cheaper to run for flight training schools. Believe it or not, the first plane, electric plane, solar plane, in fact, to circumnavigate the world was in 2016. That's a Solar Impulse 2 showing there. So yes, 10 years ago now since an electric plane actually flew around the world. There are actually flying cars. That's a single pilot vehicle called the Black Fly, if you want to look it up. It's registered for sale in the USA. Ultimately, it's to be an autonomous vehicle, so you can order it up on your app and then have it land next to you in its designated landing spot. It's vertical takeoff and landing. Those wings basically fold vertical and it will lower you down on propellers. And then as it takes off, they turn into wings. Then off you go. It'll do about an hour, just an hour's time and about 100 kilometers an hour. So you can do anything up to 100 kilometers flying there. That'll be rather fun to be able to hop in that and get dropped off. Autonomous cars, believe it or not, that was built here in Victoria and is overseas being trialled now. Electric buses, there's an enormous number of those being adopted around the world. We are finally starting to see bus fleets rolling out here in Australia. A number of buses, you'll be seeing announcements from Victorian government and others actually showing up about the new full electric bus depots. Believe it or not, there are electric ferries. That's one of the early ones, the Ampere, doing a regular run up in Scandinavian countries. It will take 100 and something cars, 600 or 700 passengers. They're quite large. Even Sydney Harbour is starting to electrify some of their ferries. And the world's biggest electric ferry was actually just finished down in Hobart by Incat. And that's actually waiting to be picked up by a ship carrier and taken over to Brazil, who the people have ordered it. General equipment, the councils love these because they're very quiet, so they don't annoy the neighbours when a park backs up to somebody's house or whatever. And they recharge quite easily over a 10 or 15 amp power point overnight. And there are even electric boats. That one's built by Maserati if you've got multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend. But there are actually electric motorboard, outboard motor kits and things that can be bought. Obviously not for very long range, but quite useful for various, say, river use or whatever. So yes, the electric transition is coming in all forms, but for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about cars. Next up, the big question at the moment, it's on everybody's mind, is how much cheaper is it to run a battery electric vehicle? So this one's a really good comparison because Hyundai built both a fully electric and a fully petrol Kona. So I've just taken the general government stats on what they use in terms of petrol and electricity. So I'm taking the 2024 Kona. It's rated at 14.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And the two-wheel drive Hyundai petrol at 6.2 litres per 100 kilometres. As you can see there, they're quite comparable sort of numbers. It's just one's using electricity, one's using fuel. We're going to pick a round number of $2 per litre, and we're going to pick an off-peak EV tariff, which you can get for 6 or something 8. I'm running on 8 cents from one of the power companies. OVO, I think, we're under 6 cent one. There are 3 different EV tariffs for an overnight charge. And if you're running on those sort of tariffs and litre costs, that's the comparison. For 10,000 kilometres, the Kona will cost you $90. The internal combustion engine Kona will cost you $1,240. So you're saving $1,150. I do need to point out that the average fuel use of cars sold in Australia now is somewhere around 12 litres, 12.5 litres, 12.4, I think is the number. So if you double that petrol number for the average fuel used by the average new car sold, that's about $2,500 in petrol. If you double the electricity, you're spending 180. So the savings get quite big quite quickly. If you're doing 20,000 Ks, double it. If you're doing 40,000 Ks, double it again. Service savings, most of them still need servicing. Some of the companies are better than others. Tesla don't have a service schedule. It just pops up when it needs something done. BYD have a rather cheeky service schedule that is actually slightly more than a petrol car. Yeah, just a warning on that one. You get lots of other benefits with the BYD, so don't get me wrong, they're still a good EV, but they're a little cheeky on their servicing prices. But you're still saving money in overall because you don't have your brake pads and all sorts of things wearing out anywhere near as fast. As I'll talk about a bit later, the thing called regenerative braking, where as you slow down, the motor turns into a generator, and that slows the car rather than using brake pads. So many EVs still have their original brakes and pads long after a normal petrol car does. So talking about charging, it's a new paradigm, and it's actually two ways, one socket. The plug war, as it was called, was pretty much sorted out 2017, 2018 in Australia. In America, it was sorted out about 18 months ago with a different plug because they have a different electrical system. And in Australia and all three-phase countries, so Europe, New Zealand, all those sort of areas, this is what we have. It's called a CCS2, Combined Charging System, Type 2, because that is the Type 2 AC plug. So the top half is what you charge with your home chargers or your portable chargers where you plug into a power point. And on the bottom two really big pins, you use the really big DC fast chargers if you're doing a Melbourne to Sydney or Melbourne to Perth run. As you might have noticed, I had a picture of me on the very first slide of me driving to Perth about 4 years ago. So it's not that hard. You can actually get there, and it's getting better and better all the time with the rollout of DC fast chargers. But they have this big fat cable, this big plug, plugs into the one socket, and that's your DC fast charge system. The old system had a big separate DC plug and a separate, you can see the Type 2 AC plug next to it. That's in a Nissan Leaf. There are no full battery electric cars brought into Australia officially with that plug anymore. The Nissan Leaf is no longer sold here. The replacement, the Nissan Ariya, even the new Leaf, which we may or may not see here, uses the CCS2 system. And all other full battery electrics. There are one or two plug-in hybrids still using that old system because they come from Japan, but Japan is the only place that uses that now. The only ones you will see it on if someone imports a car from the Japanese second-hand market that is brought in with that, but it's the only time you would see one. Moving right along now, key point number one is in a 24-hour period, the average car is parked 95% of the time. So why waste your time like we do now, refueling during a trip? It's make use of that time and actually recharge it when it's doing that 95% of the time of sitting around doing nothing. So key point here is we're not in Qantas anymore when it comes to refueling. Private charging will predominate, and it's 80 to 90% of all charging. That's what that 95% of the time it's sitting around is part of that. So we don't need to swap all our petrol stations to fuel bowsers because 80, 90% of their business is going to evaporate, especially in the cities and towns. So the best places to recharge, by the way, are not necessarily where fuel stations are, because you do need to stop for a trip, say Melbourne to Sydney, which is those few times you will use those DC fast chargers. You do want to get out, stretch your legs, have a cup of coffee, or sometimes you might want to recharge during the day, in which case you stop at Bunnings. That's where these DC chargers are starting to pop up, various fast food places and what have you. So the public recharging model is different to a petrol station, where cities you'll have your multiple AC and DC options, and shopping centres and what have you, where you stop maybe at a cinema 2-3 hours and get a slower charge, or a DC fast charge might get half a charge in half an hour at a Bunnings store. But they're smaller, so the petrol stations will disappear and those sites will become redeveloped. Roadhouses, so your Melbourne to Perth type stuff, they'll have very fast DC, and they'll probably expand their food and brake options a little bit. But some of the charging speeds, which I'll talk about a bit later in a later slide, you don't really get a chance anymore. They're almost as fast as petrol. And country towns, they'll have a mix of medium fast sort of DC fast things, and AC chargers if it's people might be stopping there 4 or 5 hours to browse around the antique shops, for instance. So summing all that sort of up, refueling is reinvented. I may feel like I'm belaboring this point, but a certain ABC journalist was told multiple times in a recent article saying that EVs are not quite there as far as recharging is concerned. Think of it as a mobile phone. You're not the fuel pump attendant waiting around within your trip. What they did was pretty much did everything possible wrong, including trying to recharge during their trip using DC chargers, tried to load the apps that I'll talk about a bit later onto their phone whilst at the charger. It's a bit like trying to use a new credit card for the first time before you've done all the login details. Personally, I think if she'd been around at the time of the horse and cart changing over to the petrol car, she'd have parked it next to a hay bale and water trough and wondered why the car didn't refuel itself. It was a pretty silly article. But yeah, if you think about it like this, it is a different paradigm. When you swap over, you really get used to the fact you don't have to go to a petrol station anymore. So key point number 3 is EVs now use a mix of charging options, not one size fits all anymore. It's horses for courses. You have portable chargers for power points. Most of these will come, that one at the top there on your top left, most cars come with them. Some cars don't. They cost about $200-300 for a basic one, up to maybe $800-900 for a really U-Butte one that can plug into a 3-phase power point with adapters right down to a power point, and can do all sorts of charging rates, which I'll show in the next slide. But what will happen is that's your PowerPoint type stuff. After that, you have your hardwired things. They charge at about 3.5 times as fast as the portable blue one up top there. A normal house charger will do, I'll throw some numbers around, 7 kilowatts. For a house charger, I always say, buy one with a tethered lead. That's the lead attached to the charger, because you don't unplug it, hang it over the charger and run away. Councils and things, on the other hand, prefer BYO leads. That's that one there where they have a socket and you bring your own lead. There's one there. Transitions have jumped a little there. That BYO lead, $200 to $300 ish. You can even buy them at Bunnings these days, and various auto shops, and they will plug into that socket. So unlike the airlines that get damaged at a petrol station or whatever, you look after your lead, you pop it back in the boot. But yeah, for home use, I always recommend putting in a tethered type charger if you want to go to that extent. And then, as I talked about a bit earlier, the DC fast chargers, that orange one there that looks like Escape from Lost in Space, the robot sort of looking one, they're the early generation, about 50 kilowatts. That portable blue one, by the way, is about 2, so it's about 25 times faster. That green and white one there is up to 350 kilowatts, so it's, do the numbers, half of that is 175 times faster. And I think the next slide, I actually have a table showing you sort of the difference between these charging options, and you choose them depending on how long you actually want to stop for, or how long the car's sitting there while you're asleep or whatever. So first up, what do you need to install at home? Well, if you're doing less than 100 Ks a day, a power point will do the job. At 2 kilowatts, that blue job will give you roughly 100 kilometers charge in 8 hours, 12-hour overnight sort of stop, 150. And they're about $500 installed, and they should go back to the switchboard on their own circuit. You don't want to be plugging into a power point that's got lots of other things on the circuit. For instance, if someone plugs in the electric kettle on that same circuit and turns the circuit breaker off and you don't notice, then your car's not charged next day. It really should be on its own circuit, and the wiring rules actually stipulate that they should, and probably will stipulate a must in the next update. 15 amp outlet, by the way, same cost, will add almost 200. And obviously 300 in 12 hours. So they're the sort of numbers. If you want a range of one car, doing 450 plus kilometers, which my Kona will do around town, then you put in a full home charger tethered lead showing there. And they cost, let's say, $750 for the install, not much more, in fact, than the PowerPoint in terms of cable and stuff, just a little bit more expensive cable, and the charger itself maybe $750 up. Actually, not even less, that probably starting at $450 these days, up to about $4,500 if you want one that's all singing, all dancing. We'll do solar only charging, controlled by apps, all sorts of stuff. So, as I kept referring to, there's a table, and I quite like putting this table on the left shows your AC charging, and as I said, for time per 100 kilometers, 8 hours on a PowerPoint, 4 hours ish on a 15 amp outlet, 2 hours on a home charger for 100 Ks. If you've got 3-phase charging, and your car does 3-phase, which most do will these days, most new cars will, hour and 20 minutes, 300 Ks. On the other hand, on your fast charging side, used to be about 20 minutes for 100 Ks. The average car these days is 150 kilowatt DC charging, so you get 100 Ks back in 6 minutes. The fastest ones will do 250, 300, 350. You're looking at maybe 2.5 minutes per 100 Ks. The super fast, or what they call it, flash charging system, BYD have just announced that is coming. They can do, let me think, something like over 1,000 kilometers. So it would be, it's less than, let's try to think, it's less than a minute per 100 kilometers. Sorry, 1,000 kilowatts. They're really fast charging. They will be obviously very expensive to use. So if you really want a petrol station-like experience, yes, you could. They would cost more. But again, you might not need to use it more than once or twice a year if you forgot to recharge. On your way to work, those options are coming. By the way, I've been involved in writing a course for electricians on installing car chargers. And there's a couple of things that I'll refer to now and a bit later. First one is, there's a good rule of thumb. How many kilowatts your charger is. So as I said, that plug-in one that I showed on the previous slide, it was a 2 kilowatt charger. It'll give you 2 kilometers in 10 minutes. On the other hand, a 350 kilowatt charger, if your car takes that much, will be 350 k's in 10 minutes. Again, both of these work, these rules of thumb, up to the maximum charge rate of your car. And rule number 2, as I said, for electricians, in evaluating a situation, if you need to home charge more than 4 hours at a time, more than twice a week, generally recommend going up a size in charging. It's just a bit more convenient. And those 2 QR codes there will take you to some longer articles in both Renew Magazine and The Driven on detailing a whole lot of information around this. Charging off street, or not on, sorry, on street, please don't do this. I'm not even going to start how many different ways that's wrong. There are options though, and these are come popping up around the world and in Australia. 3 of these are actually available in Australia. The Netherlands one isn't here, but there's an Australian equivalent from Vehicle Charge Solutions and is being trialled in Meri-bek at the moment. The Kubo Charge one that's in the UK, basically a rubber strip that you can poke the cable down into, and that's starting to be introduced here with some trials, I believe. The other one there, the curb charger, it's a pop-up charger where you pull it up and plug in, is actually past the trial stage in Port Phillip Council. Again, the website's there, and they're starting to, actually, I think we'll be moving up to Sydney soon for some of the inner suburban areas there. We actually have some on-the-street charging in our Boroondara Council. If you go to that Boroondara website, it'll actually list the various chargers, and there's this trial of on-street charging there with a BYO socket charger. That one's, I took a walk around the other day around the corner from me and took a photo of it. Hopefully they'll mark it out and put, no parking except for EVs, because it was fully parked with petrol cars at the time, but it wasn't actually fully commissioned yet. But yeah, go to that website and you'll find out some more. Apartments even, there's going to be more talked about it later, but I'll just talk very briefly about it. The best solution is putting in a separate switchboard for all the chargers, and then you put a static, you basically say, okay, you've got 90 amps allowable for any and all car chargers. So if you have 9 car chargers, 90 amps, they all get 10 amps. If you've got half of them, they get 20. In this case, 3 of them are plugged in, so all of them will get 30 amps. That's a good way of doing it. And you can even do a dynamic system where it actually measures how much power coming in. So after midnight, there's very little power being used. So say we've got an extra 90 amps to go, so we can actually double what everyone's available. If everyone plugged in, can actually get double what we would have otherwise. So a little bit there. The best practice is that sort of switchboard and control. So you have a static and dynamic control of your charging, and it will move on to both at the car charger level and at the building level. Worst scenario is for a lot of places running cables back to the apartments, because they'll soak up all that extra 90 amps for the first 3 cars, and the next, if it's a 10 apartment lot, the next 7 in fact, have basically no headroom left for charging. So sometimes that can work. There are situations with that be. So I always recommend get independent advice. There is no one size fits all solution. That literally could work well for individual apartments with your chargers fed from individual switchboards. And other situations, it's an absolute worst case scenario. So it'll be more talked about a bit later, but that's sort of the basics of it. Finding your charging stations, New South Wales have actually brought in a standard, and that's the sort of thing that will start staying through New South Wales, and hopefully the rest of Australia will adopt that standard. Sometimes a bit like finding where's Wally's charger, but this website called PlugShare, I think I've got that website there, plugshare.com is your best friend for finding chargers at the moment. So I'll go back one step. As you can see there, I've only listed 2 types of charger. That BYO lead public charger is the green dot, and your DC fast chargers are the orange dot. And if you click on any one of those dots, it'll give you a whole lot of detail. And this one says it's a ChargeFox charger. So then you would go over to the provider apps. So one provider is ChargeFox. You don't have that app on your phone, and you literally just tap on the phone, say start charging, and off it goes. EV is one particular one I like. Their app's not as good as ChargeFox, but once you charge once with the car, you can open up the app and say, yes, that's my car. Every time you see that one, just let it go. So after that, you never need to open the app. So I can pull up to an EV charger now and plug in, and it just starts charging. And all I have, if I want to, log into the app and just check where it's up to for charging. So if I popped out for a pub meal or something in the evening and I'm getting it recharged before I go back to a motel because they didn't have any charging, as I have done in the past, I just literally will be watching the app, seeing when it's reaching the charge level I want, and then I'll wander back having finished my meal. It just makes very low stress charging. I often get the question, how far can you go on a charge? And there are in fact 3 different standards worldwide for using or for testing standards. There's the NEDC, which we still use in Australia, but Europe dumped in nearly 10 years ago now. There's WLTP, which is the new European standard, and the US EPA. WLTP reflects what driving happens in Europe, so it's more in a suburban to suburban driving with a little bit of 100 kilometre an hour regional stuff. US EPA obviously does more suburban stuff, higher speed, longer distances on interstate highways, so their test standard reflects it. So my Kona, around town, I would get 480, 500, even my range estimator says for even 520. I chickened out when it said 530 once, and I drove it up to 510 and went, well, still showing I've got about 5% left, but I'll recharge anyway. So yeah, I can get the WLTP number. I would never get the NEDC number. The best way to remember NEDC stands for is not even darn close. So it's actually New European Driving Cycle, but not even darn close. I've always preferred to call it because it isn't. Annoyingly, up until now, Australia has still been using NEDC. That changes 1 July this year, and we're swapping finally to WLTP. Most EVs on the market are actually showing the WLTP number. There's only 1 or 2 that quote both. BYD is one that quotes both. So make sure you're actually looking at WLTP numbers, or horses for apples to apples comparison is what you're looking for. But 1 July this year, we will be switching to WLTP. So the window sticker on new models arriving after 1 July will all have to quote WLTP. At the moment, all plug-in hybrids generally quote NEDC because they give better sounding numbers. The BYD Shark, for instance, which is a plug-in hybrid, quotes 100 kilometre range, but that's NEDC. It's about 70 in real life. For some reason, they prefer quoting it. So if you're looking at that, they're just putting it in words. Around 30% too high for NEDC. And by the way, the Chinese one is even worse. There's obviously 1.4 billion Chinese. They drive rather slowly in very crowded towns. So their standard reflects that. And unfortunately, it's even worse than NEDC. So if you see CLTC, maybe subtract 35, 40%. Please, if you want a reasonable estimate for around town type driving, WLTP is good. If you're doing a lot of country driving, US EPA is a number. The fact sheets I'll refer you to a bit later quotes as many of those numbers as are available. Obviously, some models are not sold in the US, like many Chinese brands now, so they don't have a US EPA number. And most cars actually are not rated to NEDC anymore. I think the rest is just a little bit of explanation. That QR code will take you to a longer article. Coming trend, vehicle to X, so getting power out of your battery and feeding something. So a lot of people have been waiting for it. I get a lot of questions about it. The old ChAdeMO plug that I talked about, that's lost the plug war. It used to plug into the DC side, so it needed a big box to plug into the DC socket, and then it converted AC to DC. You get really good power out of it. But they were big and bulky. They cost still about 10 grand if you wanted one, and they're not legal to buy in Australia anyway because nobody has compliance them. So as I said, the ChAdeMO lost the plug war. The CCS system realised the problem and uses the car's inbuilt charger to just reverse flow. So you just have a little adapter you plug into the charge port, or some cars that come with a 3-pin plug inside the car, a 3-pin socket, I should say. Much easier, much simpler. You don't need to lug that great box around and do your back end lifting out of the boot. The next layer up, that's vehicle to load. You just plug a lead into it. That, by the way, shouldn't be plugged into your switchboard or generator output. There's various reasons for that, including you can blow up the electronics in cars that I've heard happening. So plugging extension leads is fine, very good for running, say, fridges and things. If you do have a power failure, just pop an extension lead out, but please don't use it to interface with your switchboard. Because the next layer up is vehicle to home or vehicle to building, V to H, V to B. And that, along with vehicle to grid, where you can feed power out to the grid, are both done via the DC side, even in the CCS2 system. Now, key point with this is, and I'll pop these up, currently, many new cars will offer you vehicle to load, and that fact sheet I'll refer you to a bit later actually lists as a summary page which ones have it. Also, many new cars arriving now are V2H capable, or V2G capable, because V2H and V2G are basically the same thing, but the box is different. As in sort of the software. The box is the same, the software is slightly different. Vehicle to home never connects to the grid at any stage. So you have a little gap when it turns off the grid and onto the car, and vice versa, whereas vehicle to grid does a seamless changeover, and you can sell power back to the grid. That's pretty much the only difference between them. So many cars arriving now are actually capable of doing it. You can even buy the boxes. They're actually approved for sale in Australia, and various charger retailers have them sitting on their shelves. But, and this last one, the vehicle manufacturers, they haven't warranted the batteries. They haven't announced it as a feature. So you could potentially void your warranty, even though you could put it in now. So we just have to wait. So hold your horses if you're waiting for vehicle to grid. It is so close, but not quite there yet. So future-proofing installation, and another bit of that electrical course that I've done for electricians. Smart chargers, those ones that do ramping up and down of the level of charging, say on a hot summer's afternoon. The grid wants to be able to just ramp them down, say from 32 amps down to maybe 15 for 3 or 4 hours, and that they may be mandated for anything over 20 amps. Germany does that now. As I said, vehicle to grid is coming possibly sometime this year, definitely next year. We are all moving to all electric homes in the long run. So when you're doing any electrical work, plan ahead. Putting in a bigger switchboard, allow lots of room for all these extra sensors and things. Put a cable in for 32 amps, even if you're just putting a 10 amp power point on it for now. It's a lot cheaper to swap the outlet and the breaker later than it is to put a whole new cable in. That labor is the same, and the cable itself doesn't cost very much more. And pop a data cable in, because some of these chargers, being smart, actually want to have sensors in the switchboard. If you're building new, run to the data hub. A few practicalities. As an electrician myself, or former electrician in some ways, I don't do a lot these days. I see a switchboard like that, I cringe, because you can't do anything with that. You need a new switchboard. All these are articles from Renew magazine, and they're also listed on my website as well for those that aren't subscribing to Renew, but I would highly recommend subscribing to them. Somewhere off the street to park. Choosing the right tariff is also quite important. Again, smart or dumb charger choice. I could do a whole presentation on them, but there's a whole article on them. So if you want sort of one that just plugs in and works, or you want one that does all your sensing for solar and whatever else, time tariffs, all that sort of thing downloaded to it. You may need that lead that I talked about to use public chargers, and it's useful to carry that higher power one as well sometimes. As I said, they're all available at my website, or if you've got the back issues to Renew or have the online availability, they're all there. Quickly run through what's coming to market this year. There's a little Honda Super One, a little city runaround, the Neo Firefly, sort of a small, the Honda Super One is a micro-sized passenger car. The Neo Firefly is a light passenger car, new Chinese brand. Leapmotor B05 is a passenger car rather than the ubiquitous SUV. Mazda are finally hitting the EV market, and Polestar 5, their high-performance sports car version, it will be arriving later this year too. Small SUVs, we're getting a good bucket of them. The Suzuki Vitara, their first EV, is arriving next month, in a few days. MG EV4 Urban has just arrived. It's sort of the slightly cheaper, cheap and cheerful version of the MG4 that's currently around. And Skoda are actually bringing in a small SUV later, last quarter of this year. Medium SUVs seems to be the biggest chunk of the Australian market, and there's a bucket load of them turning up. The Volvo EX60 is probably the one that a lot of people are asking me about. That'll be the fourth quarter of this year. There's even some light commercials arriving. The Kia PV5 is arriving. They've announced, actually haven't announced pricing yet, but the LDV e-Deliver 5, they announced the pricing of that yesterday, and it's arriving in July. The Toyota Hilux is arriving second half of this year, and they've announced pricing for that. MG, the U9, they're bringing that end of this year. As you can see there, the Toyota Hilux, they're wanting 75,000 plus on roads, 240k range. You could buy a KGM Musso dual cab ute now on the road for 60 or 64, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, and it has a 400k range. So I'm not quite sure what Hilux is up to, or Toyota is up to, but it's a good start. And there's even possibly this little light truck turning up later this year, be a better 1 ton load, and that'll be quite a good cheap one. And of course, things to consider when you're buying a new car, because there's a whole lot of things with new cars, and it's not just electric cars that have these sort of issues, as I'll describe them. So if you go into the showroom, these days you'll tend to find there's a whole lot of new brands. Will there be a dealer available around when you want? Some of them only have 1 or 2 in the dealers in the biggest of cities. Some like Toyota or Hyundai are all over Australia. Are the stalks logical and easy to use? Not to pick on one in particular, but I will. The Aon UT from GAC combines the lights, the indicators, the wipers, front and rear, and the washers all in one stalk. Try making sense of that. So if you have multiple people driving different cars in the family, might not be the best choice. If you're not unhappy with that and only one person using it, you can get used to it fairly quickly. If you prefer a driver's display in front of you, like a lot of the Korean cars and a lot of others do, some of them have a HUD or head-up display, like the Volvo EX30. Teslas have neither of those two and have no driver's display at all, just one screen. Everything's done through there. So the next question is, do you really like screens and apps, or do you want knobs and buttons? And there are horses for courses. Quick note, the new regulations in Europe and China are actually mandating that analog controls, including indicator stalks, must at a minimum for the basic functions be there. And the advanced driver assistance scheme, basically this fourth A could be interpreted as, I think I put it in there. No, I didn't. The fourth A, I sometimes describe it as by advice, assistance, annoyance, or aggravation. Some of them are really frustrating, so take it for a test first. As you could read in some of my reports, I've actually reported on so few that if I start swearing at a test car, because I'll often have them for a week, by day 2 or day 3, it's definitely, that's when it gets the aggravation work. Also, don't be afraid of buying secondhand. Car sales, for instance, you can actually filter, just list all the cars and then open up the filter for fuel electric, click on electric, and then scroll through for your particular brand and model. It's quite easy to do. When it comes to buying secondhand cars, you can actually get battery test reports, and Pickles Auctions amongst the first actually offering them as standard with all the EVs that they auction. But you can actually commission them to be done on a private sale if you wish. And there is actually an article in Renew magazine on assessing the major parts of an EV. Don't forget, 2/3 of an EV is still a petrol car, or still like a petrol car with brakes, suspension, steering, lights, 12-volt systems, seats, seat belts, all that stuff. Probably a third of it is different with the electric checks. So you need to get someone in to do it for you, like that battery test, or there's various things you can do to check it out. Initially, there's a whole lot of steps you described in that article. That's also listed on the AEVA website. I'll finish off with a bit of EV myth busting, and then I think I finish off at about 8:15, so I think I'm on time. This one is quite a good one. Everyone goes, oh, they catch fire all the time. They don't ever have one in a car park or things. Well, not quite for a big insurance company in the US did a analysis a couple of years ago now. Out of 100,000 hybrid vehicles, 3,500, 100,000 sales might go up in flames. Petrol vehicles, 1,500. Electric vehicles, 25. Take home message, if you don't want a car that catches fire, don't buy a hybrid. Nissan, in their 15 years, have had no battery fires whatsoever. It is, I should actually update it, so nearly 800,000 Leafs sold in that time. This is a bit of a furphy that's been getting around, and I think it's sort of dying out again now, but they weigh significantly more than internal combustion engine cars, so they really damage our roads. As you can see there, I did an analysis of the Kona petrol versus the battery electric, 11 to 17% heavier, and the batteries are getting more energy dense, so they are getting lighter all the time. Genesis, 15%. Volvo petrol, these are ones that had petrol and full battery equivalents, 14%. So you're not looking at a huge number difference. So they're not pounding, not double the weight, they're not pounding our roads to death. It's people's choice of bigger, heavier cars in general, not the fact that it's EVs that we're seeing bigger, heavier cars and bigger smashes. Are they more polluting than internal combustion engine cars? Or just for running costs? No, they aren't. In Tasmania, this is 10,000 Ks. And for Tasmania, it's 1/4 of a tonne versus 1.5 tonne for 10,000 Ks. Corolla versus Kona, just as a number. Even in Victoria with our brown coal, 1.41 versus 1.5. And if you're running off your own solar or subscribe to grid energy, it is still better. And that's using the Australian greenhouse accounting factors and the methodology that's used worldwide for this account system. And I do this analysis about every 5 years for EU mag. Another one is the life cycle. You'll never get it back, according to some people. Well, in the US, 6 to 16 months payback for the manufacturing emissions, 1 to 2 years because they don't drive as much. in Europe. And if the manufacturer, like Volvo, Polestar, are working towards their manufacturing being all green energy to start with, there'll be no good debt to start with as it rolls out the factory gate. A mix of technologies is needed. Some people say, oh, we need multiple, won't just be battery electrics. Well, we have 4 types of electric vehicle at the moment. The full battery electric vehicle, the plug-in hybrids, the hybrid electric vehicles, and the hydrogen car, the fuel cell electric. Fuel cell electric is basically a zombie, as in a dead person walking around that doesn't know they're dead yet, because there's very few refueling stations, 8 or less in Australia versus however many power points there are. So you can pretty much write them off. They're manufacturers. There never were many sold or built, and they're basically all but being discontinued. Some people are still experimenting. Even in trucks, as I said right at the start, they're pretty much dead. So we can write them off. The hybrid electric vehicle, if they run out of petrol, they stop. They're basically a fuel saving device. So as the car slows down, it turns the motor into a generator and recharges the battery. And the bans overseas, when there are no new petrol, diesel, passenger and light commercial vehicles come in, like Norway has already, they are included because they don't run on electric at any stage. They just have an electric boost function, saving petrol. So they fade away. So we're left with 2, the plug-ins. Of those 2, the plug-in hybrid has a lot more complications, costs more to service. Ultimately, as the battery electric vehicles get cheaper and cheaper, the use case for the plug-in hybrid gets smaller and smaller, so they will fade out. In Norway, for instance, they're very tiny percentage of all sales, and they're over 90% plug-in cars now, and it's less than a couple of percent of plug-in hybrids. Rest of battery electric. So we will see basically full batteries will be, by 2035, it'll pretty much be the BEV. It won't be a mix of tech, because some of the manufacturers that haven't caught up with their battery technologies and selling enough battery electric cars will try to convince you of. Those EV information fact sheets, that QR code will take you to them. There's a listing of all the electric cars, passenger cars on the market, updated monthly. There's one listing all the ones soon to come. And there's even one for the light commercials, and I've just started one for trucks there. And for every one car and light commercial on the market, there's a double-page fact sheet with all exactly the same headings, so you can compare them easily. When they become second-hand models, that sheet there is done quarterly, and there's a fact sheet on them, and they roll over to that second-hand fact sheet to look at things, issues to look for. And as I referred to earlier, there's a looking for your first electric vehicle brochure that the link is thrown in the chat. So I think that's about it. If the last one, oh no, just a couple of things on organisations. Renew, I've mentioned. Australian Electric Vehicle Association. I think these links will all pop up. Australian websites, the Driven, which I write for, the Australian Electric Vehicle Council, I should say. They have some really good fact sheets, although they do proudly represent the electric vehicle industry. So some of their stuff will be biased to what the vehicle industry wants you to hear, but they do some very good stuff and a good annual report. And as of my own website, the evchoice.com.au. I think that just about finishes it. That's a 1906 electric car, by the way, with a lady showing off the latest and greatest safety car charger at the time. So if you want a copy of the slides, email EV News at Big Pond. I think actually they're putting a presentation pack on the website as well. They'll be showing there as well. So I'll hand back to you. I'll unshare and hand back to you, David.
In fact, I think it might be me up next. So thanks, Bryce. Good, entertaining and informative as always. I'm Russell Williams, representing Electrify Boroondara. I've been asked to talk about a couple of topics that are dear to my heart. Firstly, about apartment charging. Bryce mentioned that in a little bit of detail. I'll talk in a few other options. And a bit of theory about long distance road trips. Next, thanks, Julian. And again. So apartment EV charging is, I think, one of the important things which the industry needs to get hold of. For those of us who are very interested in electrifying households, getting into apartment basements is probably the best options we have for apartment dwellers to decarbonise their life. There's this conundrum of there's no EV charging in basements, and that's because owners corporations haven't got demand for EVs in basement because there is no EVs. It's a vicious circle. Sorry, next slide, please, Julian. So yeah, there's a bunch of barriers in place. So as Bryce mentioned, the availability of power in some common basements is a problem. Difficult metering back to the apartment owner, the user of the energy that needs to be charged. And owners corporations are very good at saying no to things. They're very risk averse, and they've got lots on their mind. They've got fireproof cladding that they need to worry about, and water leaks and all sorts of other stuff. So having a small percentage of their apartment owners wanting EV chargers generally just puts stuff into the too hard baskets. So there's a few interesting options coming up. Next, thanks, Julian. There's an emerging capability of having smart power points in the basement, so people can plug their trickle chargers, which Bryce talked about, plugged into a power point, which can be, the usage on that power point can be then charged back to the user. So even though the power circuits that are in the basement may be owned by and metered by the owners corporation, this capability allows people to scan a QR code and to have their usage charged back to them. So the owners corporation can recover their costs, and it's a very low upfront cost, low risk, and very scalable. And I've got a photo in the next slide. Thanks, Julian. So interestingly, in our own backyard, a couple of months ago, I think the second largest EV charging site in the world, just down from Bunnings Hawthorn, for those of you who live in the area, the Sienna apartment block, which has got 250 basement car spots. All of these car spots, all 250 spots, have got these smart power points installed. So effectively, there's a site spread over 2 basement levels with 250 car charge points. And just for note, in the bottom photo there, you can see an Australian-made electric motorbike plugged into one as well. That's called a Civic. So Bryce, you didn't have you had an imported electric Harley on your slides, but you didn't have the Australian-made one, which is worthwhile. I'll put a few links in there. As I said, owners corporations are notoriously risk averse, and it takes a lot of effort to try and overcome the inertia to get them to think about basement charging. So there's a couple of links there if you're wanting to convince your owners corp to get some charging capability into your basement. Follow those, or give me a call and I can give you a little bit more information. But yeah, important message there is it's complicated, but it's certainly doable. And I think that's all from that one. Thanks, Julian. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and Bryce spoke about it in general, that long distance road trips are becoming possible, and day by day they're becoming more possible. Next slide, Julian. So I think we've overcome 2 large barriers to driving long distance in Australia. So firstly, there's a lot of fast chargers around. So there's over 1,200 locations across Australia which have got what I would call fast charging, so greater than 75 kilowatts. 75 kilowatts gives you the capability of adding about 450 extra kilometres for every hour of charging. The other thing that's changed a lot in the last few years is now a large majority of cars, almost all new cars these days, EVs, come with a real world range of 400 k's or thereabouts. So if you combine the fact that your car has got a 400-kilometre range, and in reality, along the major highways, there are 75 kilowatt plus charges every 70 to 100 kilometres. You can do road trips. So we all remember when we were kids, we'd jump in a car with a bunch of mates and drive from Melbourne to the Gold Coast over 24 hours, and 3 or 4 of you changing over, driving for 3 hours and swapping over and having a sleep in the back seat. We're not quite there with EVs, but we're getting pretty damn close. So if you've got these capabilities, the 1,200 or more charges, so fast charges every 100 kilometres or more, and you've got a 400-kilometre tank. Julie, next slide, please. You can effectively do a road trip, drive for 2 hours, take a 30-minute break, drive for 2 hours, take a 30-minute break while you charge, drive for 2 hours, and you can keep going infinitely like that. And in the past, there was a bit of a risk, because what happened if one of those charges that was spaced every 100 kilometres was not available, that there was a queue there, or that it was faulty, or it had been vandalised. Now with a 400k range, that's not a problem. So bottom line from this is, with the current car technology, with the current EV charging infrastructure that's out there, road trips on major Australian highways, not a problem. And it's getting better day by day. Instead of 75 kilowatt charges every 100 kilometres, you'll start finding 150 kilowatt charges maybe every 70 or 80 kilometres. So your spacing becomes better. And yeah, road trips now absolutely possible. That's it for me. I want to hand over to Darpan now, who's going to talk a little bit about battery tech. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Russell and team. So we've already heard a lot about EV charging and stuff. So without going too much technical into the battery, I would like to introduce a few key concepts about EV battery in particular. And please remember, we are talking about BEV batteries and not other forms of EVs. So a simple way to think about it is through a simple mindset shift. The battery is not just a technical component. It dictates how you feel about your vehicle every single day. So what I love to say is, if a battery doesn't match your lifestyle, the most advanced engineering in the world won't make you love the car. So next slide, please. So the battery controls 3 real things in life, which we all know about, right? It's your range, your daily charging routine, and your long-term value. These are the things that you actually feel, whether you know the science or not. So you don't need to know the chemistry or the difference between the batteries, but these are the things that we really get concerned about when we think about EV batteries. Next slide, please. So not all EV batteries are all the same. So this is a most popular phrase, I think, that can relate to all kinds of EVs and batteries and stuff. So one size fits all doesn't fit for any of these things. Neither option is universally better than the other, because we have all heard about LFP batteries, the NMC batteries, and we keep wondering which one's better than other. But, you know, these are actually suitable to your specific needs and not generally better than the other. For instance, LFP, can I have the next slide, please? For instance, LFP is usually lower cost and lasts for more charge cycles over its lifespan. And it's a perfect fit for daily city routines and cost-conscious drivers. At the other hand, NMC battery, it offers higher range for the exact same physical pack size. And NMC also performs better in freezing cold weather conditions. So for instance, if you drive EV in cold weather conditions like Canada, then NMC battery would be more suitable for you. But if you are living in Melbourne, then I wouldn't think there's any difference for you in terms of temperature, right? So it just depends on your lifestyle. But there's also another one thing. So it should match your specific driving patterns. So it's not about the chemistry itself, like I've been iterating today. And also we have to note that if we consider NMC and LFP batteries that are of same size and capacity, then the charging habit slightly differs. For instance, you can't charge NMC above 80%. So practically, you are getting lesser range than LFP batteries, right? So these are all the things we need to consider. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. So why is this advertised range number never really the whole story? Because real world driving conditions happen to us, right? Your highway speed, your aggressive acceleration, whether you're driving on city or highway, the weather and heavy winds, everything impacts the range of the EVs. It's similar to how ICE vehicles behave, right? So we are only fixated on the vehicle efficiency, like the battery size and charging stuff, but then we also need to consider these factors. Next, please. So the exact same rules applies to your charging speed as well. It naturally slows down as your battery fills up or gets too hot. Think of it simply like the plumbing analogy. The battery size, you can think of it as your water tank, and you can compare your charger to the tap speed. Depending on the battery's internal temperature and current state of charge, how much charge it's currently charged to, it actually is similar to how wide the tap is actually open. So the best charging setup, in fact, is simply the one that smoothly fits your routine and not one number versus the other number. Next slide, please. And we also talk a lot about battery aging, and we have already demystified it in Bryce's slide. And by now, we already know that batteries lose capacity, but we have to understand that it's very slow over time. Most of the modern EV batteries, they outlast the car's life itself. So yes, batteries lose capacity, but they are engineered to outlast the car. And think of it as a really slow, gradual fade, not a sudden drop from the cliff. And we also need to consider that almost all new EVs, they come with at least 8 years or 160K of warranty. And even after the warranty period, it doesn't mean that the battery doesn't work. It means that the battery will probably work at its 80 to 85% capacity. So we still have a lot of life that we can take from the battery. Next slide, please. So let's head to where technology is heading. We've already heard from Bryce that BYD is recently announced, BYD has announced Atto 3 with 1000 kilowatt charging. And we often come up with a lot of news these days. In fact, every other week or every other month, we get news about new battery technology being developed. So we really have to look forward. Today's limitations are not fixed forever. Range, charging speed, lifespan, and safety are continuously improving. The industry also is actively watching other battery technologies like solid state, which is a really good contender for the batteries. But all in all, next slide, please. What I'd like to say is let's look forward. And we also share a lot of concern about EV batteries, going to the landfill sites, but we need to understand what really happens when the battery finally leaves the car, because it's not the end of life for the EV batteries. The story is circular and not wasteful. These packs are repurposed for home energy grid storage, and these are ultimately recycled. So there's a very less chunk of battery that actually goes to the landfill, and every year with technology, it's getting smaller and smaller. Next slide, please. So the final takeaway from today is that the technology available today in terms of BEV batteries is really solid, and you can actually depend on them to make a confident decision. So I urge you to connect the battery choice to your life, and you will find the perfect fit for it. Thank you so much.
Okay, next slide, please. I'm talking on a couple of topics. Novated leases, and this will only apply to a certain number of people, but they generate exceptional savings for employees. You save the GST on purchasing, you can get fleet prices on vehicles, and all your costs come out of pre-tax income, but choose your provider wisely. Next slide, please. An example, a car costing 44,000 plus stamp duty and rego, It'll only be valued at 13,200 at the end of a 5-year lease. So that's the money that you'll have to pay to buy a vehicle that you've driven for 5 years. And it'll cost operating costs of about 4,000 a year. And if you think they're high, well, they can be lower. Those are just the costs that will estimate you end up being charged the actual. Next slide, please. And you need to change your thinking. Really, the lower the residual value, the better. When you buy it, will get a lease, the loss is a deduction for tax purposes, and at the end, you pay the same amount, you pay the residual for the car. So if you've got a low residual and the car's worth more, you get it for a bargain price. And you pay less GST. So there are pitfalls. Novated lease companies can charge high interest rates, and they also charge admin costs. So don't make your novated lease exceptionally profitable for the leasing companies. Next slide, please. What you look for, you want to make sure you get a good purchase price. I've been around a few dealers recently and they say they provide discounts to leasing companies. Make sure you get the discounted price. Always check an external leasing company with the manufacturer's leasing company and make sure you compare for like. Look at the weekly cost of the lease before tax. That actually includes it all. Next slide, please. And here's a cost comparison. It actually shows how much it costs over 5 years when you buy cash, if you buy it on finance, or you get a novated lease. And I've picked the 30% tax rate. If you have a different tax rate, you get a different answer. But yeah, the real benefit here is the cash one, you pay the money up front, the novated lease you pay it over time with the 13,200 at the end. So they really are exceptional value for people who can get them. Next slide, please. And a quick look at EV safety. It's unusual to find an EV without a 5-star ANCAP rating, but new EVs can take a time to get a rating. If you want more details, the RACV has recent information on the 10 safest EVs under 50 and the 10 safest at a higher price. Next slide, please. And the information is quite detailed. I suppose I look at the protection more interested than the safety assist, but some of the new ones are really good. But from a personal point of view, some of those have got far too much on the screen and far few control buttons. You need to think about what's important to you. Next slide, please. And just on that, they are changing the way they do ratings. Because they realise that the lane keeping and other electronic driver assist systems are intrusive. We're not allowed to touch a phone in the car, and yet they put a big screen there and encourage you to use it. They've worked out that does cause problems. So they're worried about the removal of physical controls in favour of complicated screens. They're going to look at fire risks. They shouldn't find much there, and whether the car can automatically place an emergency call if a collision occurs. But the ratings are changing. Bear that in mind. From my point of view, I think anything with a 5 stars good, but the younger generation in my family believe that I should be going for the much higher safety than the basic. Next slide. I think that's handing over to Lynn. Yes, can I hand over?
Great, thanks, David. So I'm one of the first people to speak who's bought an EV. There are 2 more going to speak after me. So I was driving a RAV4 hybrid and getting pretty much the same fuel efficiency as my son, who was driving a Mazda 3. I liked the RAV4, but I'd definitely come to the conclusion that a hybrid, not a plug-in hybrid, but a hybrid was probably the worst of both worlds. You've got your ICE engine that's going to have problems over time, and you've got your batteries that's going to get older. So, and we had been making lots of changes at home, like getting a battery and solar and electrifying. And I wanted a smaller car than what I had. And so I thought, what am I waiting for? The prices had come down, and there was a lot of choice in the market. So, okay, went off to buy an EV. I only looked at two cars, really. I looked at the BYD Dolphin, and I looked at the small MG. I can't even remember what badge it has. I test drove both of those. I much preferred the BYD Dolphin, and so that's what we bought. It's a 2025 BYD Dolphin Premium, so there are two levels of the Dolphin. The Premium gives you more range. I bought it in February this year for just under $41,000. It has a WLTP range of 427 kilometers and a 60 kilowatt BYD Blade battery. So I've had it for a few months now. I would say it really hasn't taken me much to get used to driving an EV as opposed to driving a petrol vehicle. The BYD has regenerative braking, but it doesn't have I don't know what it's called, one pedal driving, I think it's called. So the drive is very similar to driving a petrol vehicle in terms of how it feels, except that the, an EV has a lot of zip. It's very responsive and they really go, so you have to be mindful that you don't end up speeding. At least that's what I find. Things that I like about the car are its ride, its responsiveness, the screen that you use to access entertainment and other settings. It also has buttons to do most of the key things that you want to do. So you can choose what you're going to do. It's got a fantastic 360-degree camera. It has a very deep boot, which I like, and there's no hump in the back seat of an EV on the floor, which is pretty cool because there's no drive shaft. So the back seat's really, quite roomy. Look, there are a few things that bug me about the car. You can only get a manual online. For example, you can't get a printed manual. I could go through a few of the things that I've had a bit of trouble with, but I think we're a bit short on time, so I'll just move on to say that trickle charging has worked fine for me at home. I've only used a commercial charger twice, and that was really just because I wanted to try them and find out what they were like. We will put a charger in at home because my husband's going to buy an EV as well. He's sort of holding off for a little bit, but it won't be too far in the future. And we have found really that both of us are driving my Dolphin. So, given that what his car is actually a diesel, and what's happened to the price of diesel. So, pretty much most of the time we're all driving my car. So, yeah, I'm concerned about climate change, which is one of the things that drove me to get an EV. But it just seems to me that it's a no-brainer at the moment. It's the prices have come down. They're great to drive. They're good for the planet and they save you money. So, what's not to like? And that's me. Done. Over to Meredith.
Hello, everyone. This is a personal account of an electric car I've had for almost 5 years and just love. It is a Hyundai Kona Highlander, which I bought second-hand from a Hyundai dealer in July 21. It was 2 years old. The cost was $47,800 plus stamp duty and GST, total $54,900. This saved nearly $20,000 from the new price. I bought it during a time of COVID lockdown, so it had to be left by the dealer out the front of the house with no handover instructions at all. This did not turn out to be a problem as it is simple to drive, but I had to read the manual to find out how to start it. Unfortunately, I've still not learnt some of the more obscure options it has. In April 22, Hyundai had a battery recall and a new battery was installed at no charge. It has been serviced annually since then at an average cost of almost $180 per service, considerably cheaper than I call from my petrol cars. After the October 25 service, I asked them to check the battery, which they did, and they said it was at 100%. It is insured with AEVA. I do not believe they charge more for electric vehicles. The premium with excess of $1,550 for the current year was $1,081. It has a nominal range of 472 kilometres. I have not tested this. It has always been trickle charged since I bought it from an ordinary power point in the driveway. It is a bit awkward getting the charging cable out of the boot and plugging it in, so now I just charge it for 24 hours or longer over a day when I don't need to use the car. This only needs to be done approximately once every 6 weeks. I start the charging when there is 40 to 60 kilometres left in the battery, and a day's charging takes it up to about 80% full. The cost for this is approximately $6, a lot cheaper than a tank full of imported petrol, but then I'm only driving about 2,000 kilometres per year. Altogether, I've been extremely happy with the car. It is fun to drive, quiet, runs with no fumes, and has great acceleration and braking. Nothing has ever gone wrong with it. It is like a new car. As a result, I believe if you choose the right car, second-hand electric vehicles are a great option.
Hello, I'm Sue Omani, and I've just got 3 slides to quickly run through. The first is some quick stats. I've owned the car, it's a Tesla, Model 3, owned it for 6.5 years. So I didn't have any worries about trying to choose when we bought it because there was only about 2 choices back then. We've driven 75,000 Ks. And in that time and over that distance, we've had no new brake pads. And it was referenced earlier about not wearing out brake pads. We've had 3 services in that time. Tesla don't have a scheduled service. You just call up when you feel like, gee, I probably should get a service. And what we're getting fixed is new wiper blades, washer fluid, air conditioning filters, things like that. So really basic. And just last month, we got our first set of new tyres for that distance. Next slide, please. So I've broken this up into local driving and then long distance driving. So for local driving, if we look on the right-hand side, when we got the car, we were given a wall charger. And so we had that installed. And with the combination of solar, which we do have on our roof, and a EV electricity plan, we often are getting power for free. So we're basically running for nothing. And that's essentially all we ever do at home. We plug it in every time we drive in the garage. It feels like it wants to be plugged in. We never go over 80%. It just tops up overnight or during the day to what we've set it to, and it's ready to go the next day. From a driving perspective, it's already been mentioned, there is lots of torque, so that's great for merging onto freeways and things like that. Regen braking is fantastic. The Tesla is quite a strong regen braking, but It's very easy to get used to, and it does have one pedal driving, and that's a dream. And it's very relaxing just having that one pedal driving. And of course, it's also very quiet. Next slide, please. Long distance driving, we've driven 75,000 Ks, so we haven't just driven around Melbourne. I've put on a map some of the places we've been. We've been up near Brisbane twice, once inland and once up the coast. We've driven to Adelaide and back. We've driven multiple times to Canberra, once going around the East Gippsland coast. So we've been, and a lot of local Victorian trips as well. I think the key difference in the way we drive long distance, I am a bit of a planner, but there is a little bit more planning. And we always plan to combine our charging with resting, eating, toilet breaks, driver swapping. And we generally plan to drive for about 2 hours and then we stop, so that we're doing charging in that optimal sort of 20 to 80% battery range, rather than needing to stay for a long time. So we're generally charging as long as we need to stop, because we know there's another charger down the road. And it hasn't constrained us. I would say it is getting easier and easier to drive places. When we first got the car 6.5 years ago, we could not have gone to Canberra via East Gippsland. But a couple of years later, we could do it, and it's now very easy. There's a charger in Can River. So it's easy to go wherever you want to go, particularly from Victoria. So that's all I really have. I guess I would finish with, I would not change it. I would not go back to a petrol car. I've travelled for work a couple of times and had to hire a petrol car, and it's miserable. I'm very happy to get back to my electric, quiet, smooth driving car. So there are no regrets at all. Thank you. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Sue. I think I'm on next to go through some questions. And Sue, I just reinforce what you just said. I've just come back from a fortnight in Perth driving a hybrid, and I hated it. I wanted to get back into my EV. So I absolutely love your thoughts there. We've had some really good questions coming along, and most of them have been answered online by Bryce, David, and myself. So what I thought I'd do is probably summarise into 5 topics, which Bryce, you and I might have a short chat about, if you'd like. If you want to come back off mute and show your pretty face again. There were 5 main question topics I thought it'd be worth discussing. One was about, hey, if I'm going to home charge, do I need to upgrade to 3-phase? And I answered that saying, no. I proved that I've got a battery, I've got a mostly electric home and an EV, and I plug at 7 kilowatts. In fact, I use both solar and a free tariff. I've got 3 hours of free power from the grid with my tariff, and my battery charges, my EV charges, and my hot water system runs. And today a couple of split systems were running, and the system just looks after itself. I mean, I'm drawing almost the maximum from the grid, but it's all good. I know some people, if you've got multiple EVs, you want to charge simultaneously or do lots of stuff, then maybe 3-phase makes sense. But I think it's probably an extreme rather than the norm. Can't hear you, Bryce.
And I was quite happy with my 32 amp charges, and I would be swapping on time. And I answered a lot of the questions about using a 3-phase outlet, and I used to just have a 32 amp outlet.
Bryce, I'm guessing your microphone boom is up.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, I can now.
I'll shout at you. Sorry about that. I just realised there's this little black line missing. I was saying I live in a single phase. I used to live in a single phase house running on a 7 kilowatt charger. and occasionally used a 3-pin 32 amp outlet between charges. So I just plug in my bigger power portable one. These days I've actually moved to a 3-phase house, and all I'm doing is running off a PowerPoint going, why did I ever need a 7 kilowatt charger? I haven't got around to putting in a 3-phase line down to my new garage. And I will, because it just will give me more options, but only because I have 3-phase, not because I would never install it because I needed it. Even if you had multiple EVs, you will almost never need to have a full charge on all the EVs from 0 to 100% overnight, which is the only time you could justify 3-phase.
Yeah, it flows on nicely to the next topic I wanted to have a chat about, and it was good to hear from both Lynn and Meredith and yourself that surviving on trickle charging is fine. I recommend people. In fact, there was a question in earlier on saying, "Hey, which sort of fast charger should I go?" My recommendation is, until you've been driving your EV for 6 or 12 months, just go with trickle charging. You'll find out soon enough if trickle charging doesn't suit you. But the vast majority of people who don't drive huge kilometres and can charge in their own driveway a couple of times a week, trickle charging's fine.
Yeah, and that's where I had that slide saying if you're doing more than, say, 4 hours-ish twice a week, then maybe go up a size. Just a convenience. That's sort of the way we looked at it with getting an electrician to assess the needs of a customer. So if you're doing 3 4-hour charges a week, maybe put in a 15 amp power point instead of the 10 amp.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. And then if you do want to use solar, I'll finish off that one, because if you want to use only solar and all that sort of thing, either very manual and turn it on and off when the sun's out, or that's when you get the smart chargers. That's when you would want to put in those sort of things fairly quickly. If you want to be off-peak timing and solar charging, all that sort of stuff, smart chargers is the way to go, and you'd swap fairly quickly from a PowerPoint to that.
Yeah, or if your lifestyle just does not allow you to leave your car plugged in for long periods of time. So that's good. Another thing which came up was tyre wear and road wear, and I think you and I responded exactly the same, Bryce. The issues with EVs is they are so much fun to drive, they really tempt you to be a lead foot. If you can curtail your lead foot, no, you're not going to ruin the roads, and you're not going to ruin the tyres. I think, Bryce, you said you got 70,000 Ks out of a set of tyres because you won't drive conservatively.
Yeah, I wasn't actually driving all that conservatively. That was the interesting part. I wasn't driving around like a little old man. I drove quite comfortably. I do occasionally spin the wheels in the Kona because its ABS seems to be quite happy to do it. And I still didn't wear them out till 73,000 Ks. It's the performance Tesla drivers with their 4-point-something and 3.9 seconds 0 to 100. And they're very expensive tyres that gave them the reputation. But
or me with an electric Mini, which is just a fun car to drive, and I just love hooning in it. So, but that's me.
But if you had a little hoon car of any sort, it would still be the same.
Exactly.
You'd wear out
I had a little sporty Mazda 3 a few years ago, and I only got about 30,000 Ks out of those tyres too.
Stop having fun.
Oh, leave me alone. There was also some questions which you answered about how much care you need to take with charging your car so that you don't reduce the lifespan of batteries. Most cars these days have got really good battery management systems, and they don't let you destroy the batteries. You want to take a little bit more on that?
I'll pick it up, as we're all been taught over the years with internal combustion cars, don't do lots of short trips, you'll rust out the exhaust system. It's pretty much the way you use your car, and people will do it that way. So, and it generally doesn't do much to the battery. So yes, you might add a few percent to the battery in 10 years by being really careful with your charging, just like giving the car a good run now and again to get the water out of the exhaust system. Most of us don't do it, and it doesn't make a huge difference.
Yep. There's been a bit of mention about regenerative braking, and I think that's something that some people don't understand. I think it was Lynn was talking about the one pedal driving. Lynn, how long did it take you to get used to single pedal driving? Was it more than 5 minutes?
BYD Dolphin has regenerative braking, but not single pedal driving. I think it's Sue's car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do, and it took no time at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, because it's a Tesla and you get over-the-air updates, when we got the car 6.5 years ago, it didn't have one pedal driving, and then other brands came out with it, and Tesla went, oh, well, we better provide it. And so we woke up one morning and we had one pedal driving, and it was easy.
Yeah. Yep.
I might quickly throw in, there's a new article coming in Renew, the July to September edition. I've actually done sort of picking up the first day with your EV and setting up things like one pedal driving, regen braking, driving modes, all that sort of stuff, just to make it yourself comfortable, avoid the speeding fines and driving through the front of the garage with iPedal. As I know someone did recently. They're very embarrassed.
So that was the key questions that I saw. Actually, there's a few more that have just come in. Cold weather, Bryce, impact on range and charging.
Great question. We don't get snow and ice in Melbourne, so it does make a difference in really cold climates and snow. But Norway doesn't seem to have much of a problem. Yep. And they're pretty snowy, and the Scandinavian countries have lots of EVs. It does slow the battery. It's a chemical reaction in a battery. It does slow the reaction slightly, so it will reduce the range a bit. And also they pump some heat into the battery to keep themselves within range, so you lose a bit of energy that way as well. So yes, cold weather will reduce range for a couple of reasons, but it doesn't hurt the battery. The other end, really hot temperatures will hurt the battery, but all battery systems have battery management systems to prevent that, as in cooling and heating systems. The only exception was the Nissan Leaf that didn't have a cooling system, and strangely enough, they did have batteries that died fairly quickly in warm weather or in really hot climates like Death Valley in the US, but otherwise it's not a big issue.
Yeah. One of the nice things about EVs in very hot or very cold weather, which we don't suffer in Melbourne, but I'm a bit of a softie. My car programs during winter to automatically turn on its heating system at 8 o'clock on Wednesday and Friday mornings before I head off to golf. So the car is always toasty warm and the windows are always defrosted when I get into it. So not specific. Well, it probably is an EV specific thing, because you're not going to have your ICE vehicle start up so we can run the air conditioning while it's sitting in the driveway. Whereas an EV, it just starts when I tell it to, and I step into the car and it's sitting in a nice toasty 18 degrees, 19 degrees, whatever the temperature is outside.
Okay, I'm going to cut in there because we've gotten to 9:01 and it is time for us to wrap up this evening. So sorry to cut you off, Russell. I'm sure there were other questions, but we like to keep to time. So Julian, if you could move on to the next slide, please. And that slide is basically there to say thank you very much to all of our speakers tonight. Particularly thank you to Bryce for being so supportive of Electrify Boroondara and Lighter Footprints over a number of years now. We really appreciate you giving your time to us to help educate us about the EV future. So thank you so much. And if you could move on to the next slide, please. Just wanted to point out that Electrify Boroondara is a great organization. If you haven't subscribed to their emails, I really suggest that you do as a way to continue the electrification discussion. There will be links put into the chat for how you can subscribe to their email, as well as a link telling you how you can join the Energy Transition Group, which is run by David Strang, that meets fortnightly and addresses sort of key challenges in electrification, particularly in the policy space. So looking at the transition as a whole and the challenges that we face in achieving it. And then on to the next slide. And Sarah, if you could post those links, that'd be great. Our next Lighter Footprints event will be on the 9th of June at the Hawthorne Arts Centre. We're going to be hearing from the member for Kooyong, Dr. Monique Ryan, talking about securing Australia's energy independence. So we know the war has really raised this as a key issue, and Australia has to answer questions about where it's going to go to achieve greater energy resilience and independence. She's going to be joined by Tim Buckley, who, I don't know, some of you may have seen him on Four Corners on Monday night. He's an energy finance expert, very well regarded, and I think it'll be a really interesting evening. So suggest you come along if you can, and the link to RSVP is in the chat. Next slide, please. Right, the Electrify Boroondara Expo. If you haven't been to one of these expos, put this into your diary now so that you don't miss it. A fantastic day about absolutely everything electric, from electric vehicles to induction cooktops, great speakers, including people like Bryce. It's been fantastic to see politicians from all stripes support the expo, as well as the city of Boroondara. So save that date. And then the next slide is our last. Just to say that Lighter Footprints is a volunteer climate action group. We are fully volunteer powered, and it would be great if you were interested in volunteering with us. You can go to our Take Action page to see the volunteer opportunities that are there. It outlines our working groups, and you can also consider helping with our Vote Climate state election campaign. We have a state election in November, and we're very keen to see climate be an issue that voters are considering when they vote. And if you'd like to help us with that, we would be most grateful. So that's it from all of us. I want to say thank you to everyone who joined this evening. Hope to see you at another Lighter Footprints event soon, and hope you have a lovely evening. Thanks very much.